Welcome back to the channel. This is 20 Storm and you are watching fourth part of What If Naruto Becomes Demonic Samurai. If you enjoy this video, please like, share and subscribe to the channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
The valley echoed with the sounds of battle as a blizzard covered the battlefield in its blood-spattered snow. Since Naruto became commander of the field a year ago, there has been nothing but non-stop fighting. The war, in a nutshell, was at an impasse, with one side making a huge gain only to lose it a month later. Both sides suffered heavy casualties in a war like this, which Naruto, then 13 years old, remembered vividly. This experience taught the young commander the futility of war and the value of human life. Naruto and the others were currently tasked with destroying an outpost where Takeshi was suspected of hiding thanks to their extensive surveillance network. The rebel leader, a disgrace to the samurai way he once embraced, fled like a coward after attacking 2 more outposts that year. Mifune and his samurai were getting tired of this game, but they knew that eventually Takeshi would be cornered and have nowhere to go. As usual, Naruto was clad in heavy armor as he and 500 of his comrades hid behind a snowdrift. The Uzumaki was given binoculars through which he could observe the outpost and the movements of the guards and Mifune's other troops. After a few months of preparation, today seemed to be the day that the war would end. They were able to increase their troop strength by freeing samurai imprisoned at the other 2 outposts they overran. Those who passed a medical examination and a battery of physical exercises back at the main village signed up immediately to fight Takeshi. Although Mifune had access to a much larger force, he assigned 1,500 of them specifically to this conflict. Why is that? They expected stiff opposition because this was one of the largest outposts they had attacked before. Naruto returned the binoculars and gestured silently to his men, telling them to pay attention. Naruto spoke first, his voice hardened for battle. "Archers, I want you front and center. Once I give the signal, we will rain hell down upon our enemies. Once that is complete, find a good vantage point to cover us once we get inside the outpost. To the rest, once the archers are done, we will take the southernmost side of the compound. Are we clear?" They all shouted, "Hi, Commander Uzumaki," in unison, eliciting a nod of recognition from their leader. Naruto grinned as the archers took their positions, thinking, with Master, Takuma, and Hiroto each taking one side of this compound, our victory will be ensured. It's shocking how much time has gone by. Taking a momentary break from his thoughts, Naruto double-checked the battlefield to make sure his calculations were accurate, held up his right hand, and then dropped it down 2 seconds later with a grim smile. Numerous bows could be heard making a faint twang as lethal arrows were shot in the direction of the outpost. Many people inside noticed the sky had turned black and ominous, and they looked up in shock. They had arrived at the place where they would spend their last day in this dimension. Naruto watched the arrows fly and reflected on the past year's worth of progress. It has been 2 months since Naruto became field commander. Naruto sighed as he took a break from reading the numerous scouting reports sent his way, the vast majority of which came from Yuki. The fox was contentedly dozing on Naruto's lap as he scratched behind her ears, a smile on her face. Unfortunately for Naruto, the reports were contradictory. Others suggested possible troop movement in preparation for an attack, while still others showed Takeshi's rebels pulling back to many outposts for which Shizuka obtained the coordinates from her former master. In any case, Takeshi's biggest flaw, oversight, is responsible for most of his recent problems. What took Takeshi so long to doom himself? To which Naruto snorted with amusement before returning to his reports. Kurama remarked, "Stupid mortals, Kit. Stupid mortals everywhere." After 10 minutes of reading, Naruto came across a report that said a group of rebels had banded together to attack more peaceful villages. The young field commander was worried that more innocent people would be killed by this new group without Takeshi as their leader. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts before he could go any further. As he waited by the door, Naruto greeted whoever came in with an enthusiastic, "Enter." "You." The surprise in Naruto's voice was audible as he grabbed Yuki and greeted Mifune with the traditional, "Mifune dono." Mifune smiled as he said goodbye, "Uzumaki-san, glad to see you are in better health. Although I have Shizuka to help me heal and stay on the path I was so close to giving up on, the memories still haunt me and always will." Mifune merely nodded in response and sat down on a nearby couch. However, as he was leaving, Naruto inquired as to his purpose. "Is it rude to ask after my junior field commander?" Naruto smiled and replied, "Is it wrong for a general to leave their post?" Mifune cleared his throat with a light laugh. To which she replied, "Touché, but there is one thing I wish to discuss. The civilians." Naruto did not waste any time before telling them the news he had just read about a group of rebels forming their own coalition. This naturally led to a discussion of civilians and the numerous compliments Mifune received on their behavior during times of conflict. The reports were accurate, and Naruto provided more information than was included in some of the reports. Mifune had no idea that regular people were capable of such a thing, so this conversation was eye-opening for him. To him, they were just regular folks working in businesses and other civilian occupations to help the economy of Iron Country. But the idea that he could fight never entered his head. Mifune pondered melancholy. How great a leader can I be if I cannot recognize the talents of my own people? A lot of lives could have been saved if I hadn't gotten lazy in my old age. Naruto stared as he sensed Mifune's depression and then said, "You helped keep the samurai way intact through 2 wars, General. Yes, innocents have been lost, but the time I spent with the civilians showed me that they understood this, and were happy with how you ran things. However, now we can show them that they're more than just a simple person." Mifune stared directly at Naruto and asked, "How?" The Uzumaki's expression brightened dramatically. To protect their honor, property, and loved ones, we didn't stop them from arming themselves. Mifune mulled over this idea for 2 minutes before suddenly having an epiphany. With a broad grin that rivaled Naruto's, he launched into an in-depth conversation about it that would last for hours. When completed, however, Takeshi would suffer yet another strategic setback. 4 months after civilian armament, journal entry number 645. The program that Mifune and I developed has been extremely well received. The common people no longer fear the samurai. Rather, they look up to us as heroes or role models. As a result, many samurai have passed on their knowledge of kenjutsu and other forms of hand-to-hand combat to the general public. The production of weapons, both for the army and for export to the elemental countries, accelerated as blacksmiths went into overdrive. Iron Country's economy has seen a surplus for the first time since the end of the First War thanks to the proliferation of new businesses. Even though samurai no longer patrolled civilian villages, locals were still prepared to defend themselves if necessary. Takeshi was given a wake-up call when scouts reported how the civilians treated his forces as a result of rebel coalitions. It was funny, albeit in a macabre way. If any insurgents were to attack the village and be killed, their severed heads would be displayed on a pike at each of the entrances. The war will soon be over and we will have won. Shizuka also met with Mifune and the other commanders during this initial 6-month period. Even though a trusted samurai was keeping the field base running smoothly, Hiroto was also present. Because Shizuka had supported Takeshi for an entire year prior to his departure, the stern elder that is Hiroto initially questioned Shizuka's loyalty. When Shizuka and Naruto retaliated verbally, Hiroto relented and gave Shizuka another chance. 3 hours were spent in total discussing how to put enough pressure on Takeshi to force him to give up, and everyone left with a better understanding of his 6 main outposts. Or else he died fighting like a samurai to the end. There were a few outposts to the east, close to the border with the elemental nations, but most of them were to the south of the main village. Takeshi would be effectively cut off from the rest of the world if he were to conquer the bordering states, all of which were small and easily overrun. In a nutshell, the rebel leader didn't have much time left. Dated 700 to 6 months after civilian armament journal entry. A month for each outpost. Capturing the 2 near the elemental nation's borders was difficult, but we managed to do it. When the first outpost fell, the one next to it attempted to fight back. As expected, the assault was repulsed, but the heavy casualties sustained by the enemy would prove useful for the second outpost. Shizuka and I have become increasingly close. She is a stunning and sympathetic woman, but is she cut out to be my girlfriend? If we get too close, I'm afraid I'll hurt her or lose her like I did with my master during the Second World War. The field commander position requires a lot of paperwork, so I'll have to put those thoughts on hold for now. Small platoons of samurai were dispatched as protection detail a month after these outposts fell due to an increase in attacks on civilian villages. Civilians wanted to uphold their tradition of placing the enemy's head on a pike as attacks continued despite their lack of success. The samurai, however, politely declined and instead buried their foes as if they were family. The samurai viewed this as a sign of respect and honor, but the civilians couldn't understand why an enemy would be given such a gift. One of the samurai on guard duty saw this and reported it to Mifune. In response to this perceived deficiency, the general placed a large order for multiple copies of the Bushido code and a brief account of a samurai's typical day. These were hurriedly distributed to every town in Iron Country, and as the weeks passed, the villagers began to develop a new perspective on their protectors. Some people were so taken with the samurai code of honor that they asked to be accepted into the army. It was a much-needed and enormous morale booster. Dated October 10, 730. My 13th year on this planet marks 7 years since I first began training as a martial artist. There was a lot of hoopla and presents for my birthday. Shizuka asking me out on a date was the best gift I received. The village was home to samurai and other members of the upper class, so it featured some excellent restaurants. Both the interior and exterior of the restaurant were stunning, and the food did not disappoint. How did it compare to my lovely young lady? Oh, no way. Although we didn't immediately hit it off, we ended up having a great time on the date. We had dinner, then drove to a prime sunset viewing location in Iron Country. It was here that we shared our first kiss, and the memory makes me red with embarrassment. After all, I guess we can call ourselves a couple. Naruto snapped out of his reverie about the past and nodded to the samurai behind him, prompting everyone to run towards the outpost amid the screams of the dying enemies. The archers spread out and then sped off to find the best vantage point they could, which shouldn't be too hard given that this outpost was in a valley. Fukui, Hiroto, and Takuma exchanged nods and then led their platoons in the direction of their goals as they observed Naruto's forces moving toward the southernmost side. Fukui would be responsible for the area to the north, Hiroto for the area to the east, and Takuma for the area to the west. Everyone was walking around with radios in their ears, just like during the assassination raid, but there was radio silence. Only after the entire outpost was guarded could communication begin. HQ, Outpost. Takeshi sat at the window and frowned as he watched his men scurry about trying to fortify the area against Mifune's invasion. I knew I shouldn't have trusted that whore Shizuka when this is the third outpost in as many months. The leader was deep in thought when someone rapped on the door. Enter. When one of the rebel soldiers came in, she quickly bowed and then spoke. Before saying, "Everything is ready," Takeshi-sama, the insurgent who had just entered bowed. To what time would you like us to launch the assault? There was silence in the office for a few minutes before the rebel leader broke it with an evil grin. The plans have changed, Takeshi said icily. As an example, I might say, I want you to take every prisoner and set them up for a public execution. She protested, but sir. That's over 300 men, women, and children. But was silenced by an evil glare. Takeshi pounded his desk with a fist, a twisted grin spreading across his face, and the words, "I don't care what I have to sacrifice to ensure this war is mine for the taking. And if innocents have to die to achieve this goal, then so be it. If they break in, you want us to shoot them, right? And you wish us to execute them once they breach, Takeshi-sama?" The soldier mistook Takeshi's deathly grin for one that belonged on the Shinigami. The soldier, despite her displeasure, understood her orders and bowed out of the office to inform the others. "Let's get ready to skin that fox," he said. The insurgent leader then left the office and went to his personal armory to get dressed for battle. 30 minutes later, with Mifune's troops. Northern compass set, finished. Repeat after me. Copy, east in position. It's time to, west in position. We're positioned to the south. May we begin? It was a unified, commence. Mifune's troops charged the outpost with a war cry, slaughtering any guards they encountered on the way. However, they encountered surprisingly little resistance as they entered the outpost, putting everyone on edge. Indeed, they felt like the enemy was all around them, but why they hadn't attacked was a mystery. They slowly made their way to the center of the outpost, and when they got there, they all looked terrified. Over 300 men, women, and children were kneeling and bound with rope in front of Takeshi's forces, ready to commit the unspeakable. No one spoke or moved out of fear of what might happen next. The atmosphere was eerily silent. Takeshi said, "Welcome, Mifune's forces, to my home," as his followers cleared a way for him to advance. Takeshi gestured toward the inmates in front of him and said, "I do hope you're enjoying this little welcoming gift I've set up for you all. Answer me this. After witnessing the loss of so much innocence in a single day, how do you think your forces will react? Will they falter, will they see themselves as failures, or will this bolster their will to fight?" Fukui pleaded, "Takeshi, my brother, I beg of you. Please reconsider your decision. The future looks bleak if you continue down this road." Takeshi snapped back angrily, "I've told you once, my brother, and I will tell you again and again and again until I perish. The brother you knew is dead. He perished alongside the charred remnants of our home and watched his parents' bodies be laid to rest. The commanders picked up on the somber undercurrent Takeshi tried to bury at the end of his speech, and it left them wondering if this whole performance was an act. Before they could deliberate any further, Takeshi twitched a finger, and all 300 unjustly accused people were put to death. Now there was blood in the streets, and it seemed like no one would ever speak again. There was then a moment of silence, broken by the sudden appearance of an orange-red blur and the subsequent loud bang. Naruto's punch, which had been Kyuubified, had knocked Takeshi off his feet and sent him hurtling toward the far end of the outpost. He or she was clenching their teeth in rage at what had happened, the Kyuubi cloak fully activated. As fighting broke out all around him, Fukui yelled, "Please calm yourself, my student. Remember, revenge isn't the samurai way." Turning to his master, who recoiled in fear, Naruto explained the situation. Aside from tears and an angry snarl, the expression was identical to the one he saw 7 years ago when Naruto entered his shop. When asked about his feelings, Naruto said, "I know master, but what he did is inexcusable. I guarantee that the war will end today." Fukui recalled what he had taught Naruto, saying, "Before you fight, remember what I have taught you." Fukui knew he couldn't convince Naruto otherwise. "Good luck, I hope I never have to bury a student." Kurama, hoping to calm down his container, said, "Your master is right, you know. Killing the person responsible for this tragedy will only make things worse." As he charged towards Takeshi, Naruto thought to himself, "I'm tired of innocents dying, Kurama. I can't stand for this. It's over now." After a brief pause, Kurama said, "He's awake, you know." When Kurama continued talking, it finally dawned on Naruto who he might be. Says Kit, "Yami is lying in wait, feeding on your current anger and emotions. If he takes over, I fear I won't be able to stop him this time." Naruto's sudden stop caused the Kyuubi cloak to sputter before it completely collapsed as he stood on the roof of one of the many buildings. Naruto, taking his master's and Kurama's advice to heart, closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and then opened them again as he exhaled. To quote, "Thank you, Kurama." The fox chuckled and said, "Anytime, Kit." And Takeshi. The rebel leader pushed the debris away from him with a groan and winced as he touched his right cheek. He was genuinely shocked that nothing had been damaged. "Kid's got a mean right hook," he mumbled, before getting to his feet and leaving the wreckage. Takeshi strained his senses in an attempt to locate his brother's student, but he was unable to detect any identifying markers, either chakra or ki. Is this youngster to blame for my troops' inability to detect Mifune's forces? The reverberation of Naruto's voice asking, was it worth it? All those lives? Roused Takeshi from his thoughts. Are you doing things that would make your parents proud of you? Takeshi glared at the boy and roared, "You know nothing of my pain. Come on out, boy, and fight like your master taught you. Face to face. I know all about your tricks." "Shinobi," the voice echoed back. The question, "Are you real, a clone perhaps?" Smirking, the rebel leader said, "Could a clone do this?" Earth flow spears. Several spikes of earth shot up from the ground at once and crashed through the floors of nearby buildings, causing their collapse. Takeshi laughed to himself as he released his chakra after holding the technique for a full minute. A smile that turned to a scowl as he caught sight of a figure perched atop one of the spears. Naruto shrugged his shoulders and waited for a moment before continuing, "Yes, a clone could do that, but I guess I will have to fight you to find out. You asked for a samurai battle, so you're getting one." Ready to begin his Tatehiza no Bu, Naruto jumped off the spear and landed in a half-seated position on the ground. Takeshi became emotionless as he approached his enemy, and in a flash he ran up behind Naruto and made an attempt at beheading him. In response to Takeshi's katana, the Uzumaki effortlessly performed the kata for someone behind him. For a split second, they held this position to meet each other's emotionless gaze. Naruto tried to throw Takeshi off his feet, but the fight continued regardless. The target ducked to avoid it, prompting Naruto to charge forward while slashing in an X pattern. Takeshi wasn't expecting anything and was prepared to block, but his surprise quickly turned to horror when he realized the attacker was using ki. Takeshi used his speed to outrun and leap above the attack, then continue toward Naruto, who blocked the katana with the kata for a person in front of them. Once more, they exchanged icy stares, but this time Naruto caught Takeshi's sideways glance to the right. Naruto quickly pushed the rebel leader forward, then snapped his knee into his chest, sending him crashing into the side of a rock spear. When an earth dragon flew overhead, Naruto timed his counterattack perfectly. Clones, Takeshi? I should have known you wouldn't stick to a clean samurai fight. There was a brief pause while the leader thought, and then he said, "You're a good kid, I admit that, but now you will see how powerful I really am." Naruto's katana was about 2 inches from cutting off Takeshi's head when he lost track of him and his eyes widened in surprise. The blade was inching closer and closer as Takeshi's strength overcame Naruto's, but Naruto wasn't worried because he knew how to escape. Naruto reacted quickly, stumbling backwards toward the ground before kicking upwards in an attempt to strike Takeshi in the chin. Naruto's foot was caught by the rebel leader, and he scoffed as he brought his ki-enhanced elbow down on the knee of the Uzumaki. As Naruto bit his tongue to keep from screaming, they heard a sickening snap followed by a grunt of pain. The rebel leader then launched Naruto through several earth spears by throwing the boy into the air and roundhouse kicking him in the stomach. Seconds later, the Jinchuriki crashed into the side of an abandoned building, where he immediately crumpled to the ground in agony. It's time to step it up a notch, thought Naruto, wincing as he rubbed the back of his head. Before Naruto could activate his Kyuubi cloak and stand up, Takeshi kicked him in the side, knocking him to the ground. The next thing the Uzumaki knew, Kurama's voice had stopped talking and something had been slapped across his forehead. It was then that Naruto realized the depth of true terror. Takeshi said ominously as he raised his katana to behead the child in front of him, "It seems my brother will be burying his student today." "That's too bad." Coughing slightly at the end, Naruto said, "Just because I lost a part of me, does not mean I am defeated. Tell me, how well versed are you in your understanding of ki?" The rebel leader was too stunned by the sudden onslaught of power to respond. When he looked up, he was completely taken aback by the boy's actions. "I am possible." What caused Takeshi's expression of surprise? Naruto stood there, smiling, his body surrounded by a mist that melted the snow. His once blue eyes were now completely white, and he had developed a slight muscle bulge under his protective suit. Naruto said, straining his voice, "Let me show you, Takeshi, what our ancestors discovered about the power all samurai use today. What I call a power that only I know how to use to its fullest extent." Naruto ducked down and sped off, leaving a crater in his wake, before Takeshi could launch an attack. Despite his training, Takeshi was still knocked off his feet and sent crashing through a couple earth spears before he was able to recover with a backflip. The rebel leader put both feet on the ground and made a valiant effort to locate the boy before he vomited blood and bile from a fist buried deep within his stomach. But Naruto grabbed the man's back and brought his head down 3 times on his unbroken knee, and the man didn't go flying. Rather than experiencing pain, Takeshi only felt the weightlessness of falling toward the town center, where the executions took place. Takeshi's only thought as he flew was, incredible. Fighting had been relatively simple for the other commanders. The rebel forces seemed more troubled by the executions they had to carry out than by anything else. About 5 minutes into the battle, however, something crashed into the ground beside them, stopping the fighting in its tracks. Everyone looked into the crater with shock as they saw Takeshi lying there in shambles. Something crashed next to Takeshi, and everyone backed away in shock and fear. This prevented anyone from approaching the rebel leader. Hiroto, Fukui, and Takuma all stutter-talked, "And Naruto?" Naruto smiled and held out his arms, saying, "The ways of old are wonderful, are they not?" To paraphrase, this is the true extent of the power we all use today, what our ancestors discovered long ago. Zetsu appeared out of nowhere, grabbed Takeshi, and dove into the ground right as Naruto was about to pick up the rebel leader and knock him out so he could be brought back to Mifune. Many of the rebel forces that guarded this outpost were still alive, and while this made Naruto angry, he did see an opportunity. "Your choice. Come peacefully or die by the blade." To Naruto's relief, the rebels quickly laid down their arms and surrendered rather than face the young commander in his current condition. Naruto moaned, "Master, you might want to catch me," as pain began to take over his body. There is a tremendous price for this kind of power. After saying this, Naruto allowed his ki to return to his body and staggered backwards into Fukui's embrace. Here, Naruto's teacher witnessed his pupil grimace in pain while fighting back tears. At the same time, Fukui noticed the seal on Naruto's forehead and, not knowing its purpose, decided to leave it there. As Naruto began to cough up blood, the Harumasa's eyes widened and he asked, "Why isn't the Kyuubi healing him? We need to get him home as soon as possible. Perhaps Shizuka can help." As the insurgents surrendered, Hiroto glanced at the boy and then at Fukui and knew what had to be done. Fukui, don't worry. I'm the fastest of us, so I'll take Uzumaki-san back to his house. With a nod, Fukui said, thank you, and please see if Shizuka can do anything about that seal. If not, I fear we might need to contact Konoha for help. Hiroto nodded, grabbed the boy, and sped off, doing his best to not further injure Naruto. The hospital, 20 minutes later. Hiroto ran in, past the receptionist despite her protests, and directly to an empty operating room. Many medical professionals saw Naruto in Hiroto's arms and immediately realized the severity of the situation. Immediately, 2 doctors and 4 nurses went to work on their youngest commander in the hopes of saving him. Hiroto, relieved that Naruto was in good hands, hurried to reach Shizuka's house. The medical staff rushed to treat Naruto's wounds in the meantime. These samurai were the only ones in their village who could legally use chakra. Doc, he has a lot of internal bleeding, one of the nurses said. And his tenant is not healing him for some reason. A chest tube was being prepared as the nurses gently removed Naruto's armor. After cutting off his kimono and removing his armor, a chest tube was inserted into Naruto, and he began to receive drainage of the fluid and blood from his lungs. A heart monitor he had just been fitted with showed that he was about to flatline. Oh no. We seem to be losing him. Once no one was touching the young samurai's body, one of the doctors said, clear. And administered an electric jolt. Everyone's worst nightmare, the heart monitor, continued to sound. Again, clear. The electrical current jolted through Naruto's body, causing him some discomfort. And there has been no change. The doctor who gave the shocks said, surprisingly calmly, damn it. Not this way, wake up damn you. Clear. With the next jolt of electricity, Naruto vomited up a large amount of blood, which splashed all the people who were trying to help him. The medical staff, however, was so intent on saving Naruto's life that they barely flinched. As the heart monitor came back on, a doctor asked, is his airway clear? The question was met with relief from the patient's family and the medical staff. The chief medical officer nodded in response to the nurse's affirmative answer of, yes. The chief physician sighed with relief as he said, insert a breathing tube, and put him in a medically induced coma. Once he is in the clear, we can work on his injuries. Could you please run a diagnostic and have the results sent to my office? When one nurse nodded and went to work right away, the others followed suit, relieved that Naruto appeared to be holding his own. They met Shizuka and Hiroto once they emerged from the room. As she began to cry, Shizuka pleaded, please tell me he's okay. The chief physician shook his head and smiled sadly as Hiroto put a comforting hand on her. Afraid not. Shizuka. The doctor's sad words continued, I'm afraid not, Shizuka-san. He died on us a couple of times, but we luckily revived him. Whatever that boy did, it almost killed him. To be honest, we have him in a medically induced coma right now as he is not ready for treatment to the other injuries he has. Before Shizuka could ask, Hiroto interjected, and the seal on his forehead? I'm afraid that's the case. It could be the reason his tenant isn't answering. A look of surprise crossed Shizuka's face as she said, I have limited sealing knowledge, I might be able to take it off. The chief physician was reluctant at first, but ultimately agreed because saving Naruto's life was more important. Just as the nurse had finished her examination, the head doctor sprang into action and ushered Shizuka inside. Shizuka's heart sank when she saw Naruto like this, but the nurse's frowning shake of the head only added insult to injury. Shizuka gathered her composure and stared at the seal for a moment before squinting her confused eyes. Astonished, she looked at the matrix of seals over and over again, sighed, and then made a startling discovery. I can't take it off because breaking the seal would be fatal to Naruto. Shizuka squeezed her lover's bloody right hand as tears rolled down her cheeks. If you've forgotten me, Naruto, please remember me. Hiroto was horrified by the prospect of losing a loved one in battle. Hiroto said comfortingly to Shizuka, I will have Mifune contact Konoha to see if someone could help our Akuma no Senshi. The only chance we have is this. As she was being escorted out of the room, Shizuka smiled slightly and muttered a thank you. She could only focus on the doctor's words and pray that Naruto would get better. She didn't give a hoot if this meant the end of his samurai career or not. All she wanted was to spend the rest of time in his arms. Hours later, Konoha. As his paths took care of the paperwork, Nagato relaxed in his chair and smiled. He was about to drift off to sleep when he heard a pecking at the window. He got up, confused, and removed the note from the hawk's left leg. The Godem unrolled the message and started reading as soon as he sat down. When Nagato finally sat down to read, his face had already begun to turn white. He had to read the message twice to make sure he understood the seriousness of the situation, so shocking was the news. The situation in Iron Country was no longer the only thing on Nagato's mind. He was also concerned for the safety of his cousin. Preta, hurry up and bring me Tsunade and Jiraiya. With a nod and a shunshin, the Preta path disappeared. They entered his office together a minute later. What's the matter, Nagato? Jiraiya asked in a slightly concerned tone. The Godem cut off further inquiry when he said, no time for questions sensei, Naruto is on death's door. Because of Naruto's illness, Mifune requested a sealing master in addition to Tsunade-san. The Sannin took a deep breath, but Tsunade was the most anxious because she knew the real reason for her summons. Please, tell me how likely it is that he will survive. The tone in Nagato's voice was that of a broken man as he sighed. Put another way, 5%. Without waiting for a dismissal from their Hokage, the Sannin left immediately. However, Nagato didn't mind because he was aware of the closeness they shared with Naruto. As they ran, the Sannin had only one thing on their minds. Their godson, who was only 13 at the time, was about to meet the Shinigami. They refused to tolerate such behavior. Tsunade asked, how long until we get there, Jiraiya? Normally, it would take a week to walk there, but at Shinobi speed, our speed, it would only take 2 or 3 days. The slug sage grumbled as she wished the trip would go more quickly, but then again, they were both thinking the same thing. Don't move, Gaki. We're closing in. And Takeshi. Takeshi, like Naruto, was put into an artificial coma to let his body heal from its many wounds. Tobi and Zetsu were currently hiding out in a place he had previously used in the Land of Iron. White Zetsu asked, what now, Tobi? As he saw the person's hands clench in revulsion at the scene before them. Tobi frowned as he looked at the unconscious body of the person who was supposed to be the driving force behind his plans in the elemental nations. Tobi, turning away from Takeshi's broken body, replied, although our time in Iron Country is finished, the plans have not changed. When asked about Takeshi, and what of Takeshi, will you kill him? The Uchiha laughed it off, saying, he's already dead, Zetsu. His mind is clouded with revenge. It will only kill him in time. White Zetsu continued, and of Naruto, the Kyuubi Jinchuriki? Do you want me to come get him while he's still weak? Tobi paused, seemingly thinking, before shaking his head. Let him rest and get stronger. When the time comes for us to finally meet, the world will be mine to rule. After 2 days, Naruto's ICU room. Mifune met Jiraiya and Tsunade at the hospital and led them to the holding area where Naruto was being kept. Mifune knew the gravity of the situation, so he spoke briefly. I forewarn you now, Tsunade-san, Jiraiya-san, at what you will see. The chief physician, however, recognized Tsunade even before they entered the room, and he immediately stopped her to give her Naruto's hospital report. The extent of her godson's injuries was shocking. There was internal bleeding, his right kneecap was broken, nearly all of his muscles, tendons, and ligaments were torn, and he had extreme stress fractures on most of his skeletal structure. Tsunade steadied herself and thanked the doctor before entering Naruto's room, where they found Shizuka holding his right hand and frowning. Shizuka's eyes were puffy and red from crying and lack of sleep, but she saw Tsunade and felt a spark of hope. Please, Tsunade-san, reassure me that you can help Naruto-kun. Mifune beamed at the worried expression and said, Tsunade-san, this is Shizuka, Naruto's lover. Despite his reputation as a super pervert, Jiraiya didn't comment on Shizuka-san's body because of the circumstances. Thank you for being there for my godson, Shizuka-san. You mentioned a seal, didn't you? When the Toad Sage saw what Shizuka had pointed out on Naruto's forehead, he grimaced. Almost an Uzumaki seal, but not quite. I haven't seen anything like it since the Second Shinobi War. As Jiraiya worked, the room was silent, or nearly so. The seal master was the only one they heard, and he was humming to himself as he plotted their next move. After a tense 5 minutes, Jiraiya smiled because he had figured out how to break the seal. He then drew a counter seal and placed it on Naruto's head, having previously retrieved materials for a sealing scroll. After Jiraiya left, Naruto's red aura fried the nearby medical equipment and peeled the paint from the walls, so everyone had to be hurried out the door. When the healing process was complete, The red aura vanished after 2 minutes, at which point many samurai and doctors had rushed to the door to see what was wrong. Tsunade, however, rushed to Naruto's side once it was gone and performed a quick diagnosis. Tsunade and the others heaved a huge sigh of relief when they heard, he's not out of the woods yet, but his chances are now at least 50 to 60% instead of 5. Give me a few minutes to work here, Shizuka, and I guarantee you that Naruto will soon be back in your arms. A genuine smile appeared on the girl's face, and she flushed for the first time in days. Naruto groaned and opened his eyes to the blue sky, but as he sat up, the Uzumaki met Kurama's enraged gaze. The fox was so enraged that it clamped its muzzle on Naruto's nose and let out a deep growl, shaking the entire mental landscape. Naruto, however, showed no fear as he stared into those fiery, blood-red eyes. Naruto said nonchalantly, I will not apologize for my actions, Kurama, as you and I both know it was that or be killed. You have every right to be furious with me, she said. Kurama drew back from his container and said, such apologies disgust me, but you are indeed correct, Kit. His anger was still present in his voice. I can't decide if I should eat you or be impressed by what you accomplished. I'd say I'm impressed to be the first one to survive this technique, Naruto said, but his eyes widened as he remembered the one person whose rage could match Kurama's. As in, hey, I bet Shizuka's going to be pissed. Kurama smirked as he imagined what Shizuka would do to Naruto. Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. With a nod, Naruto asked, so, how long was I out? I'm still healing the damage to your body, which means you're stuck with me for at least another month. It's been a week. Tsunade has been taking good care of you, and you can thank Jiraiya for getting that seal off. Surprised, Naruto said, wow, I didn't think Mifune would go through that much effort to heal me. A scowl formed on Kurama's face. Kit, your family and friends are all worried sick about you. You get a visitor in your room every hour on the hour. The Uzumaki grinned at this, but he had to get back to work. Kurama's annoyed growl precedes his remark, well, since I'm stuck here for a month with your furry behind. I can use your chakra for training, among other things. Kurama returned to his cave and went to sleep as Naruto began performing his Kenjutsu katas. It was very taxing on Naruto's chakra construct to maintain a nearly constant flow of chakra through him. With Shizuka, Tsunade, and Jiraiya in the real world. Jiraiya carefully observed Shizuka as she practiced calligraphy on a scrap of paper in a remote training area outside of the village. The Toad Sage's expertise as a seal master warned him that a single misstep could spell disaster, which is why Tsunade was present. Tsunade was not only responsible for healing Shizuka, but also for training her newest apprentice. Shizuka approached Tsunade the next day, after she had healed Naruto to the point where Kurama could take care of the rest, and demanded to be taught medical ninjutsu. Tsunade's curiosity had been piqued, but she had too many questions about Shizuka to take her on as an apprentice. After 10 minutes of back and forth, the deal was finally sealed by Shizuka's response to Tsunade's last question. In his query, the Slug Sage asked, how would you put this information to use? Shizuka responded that she was sickened by Naruto's condition and that she wished to aid not only Naruto but all the victims of the war. Shortly after this interrogation, Jiraiya entered in, upon learning that Shizuka was an apprentice of Tsunade's, decided to sweeten the deal by teaching her sealing. Jiraiya was disappointed that Naruto wouldn't be able to use seals like his Uzumaki ancestors because of ki, but he promised to teach his godson about them as soon as he regained consciousness. Shizuka's quick understanding of both concepts initially impressed both Sannin. Jiraiya found that she had a natural talent for selecting seal matrix designs and a steady hand for calligraphy, both of which are prerequisites for learning the Uzumaki standard of sealing. Tsunade, for her part, was impressed by Tsunade's anatomical knowledge and her advanced chakra control. Shizuka was subjected to the Slug Sannin's brutal training method, which was obviously not what Tsunade had in mind. Shizuka asked Jiraiya-sensei, how is it Jiraiya-sensei? As she proudly displayed the completed seal. The seal was taken and examined by the person with a stern expression so that nothing would be missed. Jiraiya handed it back with a proud grin, saying, very good, you successfully made a working explosive tag. Since Tsunade and I plan to leave once Naruto recovers his strength, I compiled my personal sealing books onto a few scrolls. Jiraiya took 2 scrolls out of his haori and handed them to Shizuka. She thanked the Toad Sage numerous times before putting them in a bag. Tsunade called out to her pupil, come, Shizuka-san, it is time for your training at the hospital. And then we'll play a game of dodgeball, they said. Friendly does not even come close, you senile old bat. Shizuka groaned as she rubbed her still sore stomach. Are you trying to kill me, because those rubber balls you throw become deadly projectiles? Tsunade's right eye flickered and a tick mark appeared on her head as she said, an old bat am I? If that's the case, today's workouts are twice as effective. Following her sensei, Shizuka muttered, me and my big mouth. Jiraiya didn't seem to be involved at all. He had just collapsed in a fit of laughter and was lying on the snowy ground trying to catch his breath. Mifune, the council meeting room. Mifune and his commanders are currently having a conversation amongst themselves about the outpost raid that occurred over a week ago and the repercussions that followed. Before anyone could respond, Hiroto cut in and said, thanks to Uzumaki-san's near-suicide technique, a lull has been made in this war. A good chance for us to recover, if I do say so myself. Everyone nodded and or hummed in agreement as the speaker continued, but you must understand that the unknown still exists of how badly Takeshi was wounded. It may take weeks, months, or even years, but a counterattack is always possible. Hideki began, but Fukui finished his sentence, and if we take into account how far we have pushed Takeshi in the past 2 wars, we can reasonably conclude that if a countermeasure is made. He turned to his master with a wistful grin and said, that it will be unlike anything we've seen before. And Mifune and this village will be the primary targets. We are the nerve center of the military after all. Mifune leaned back in his chair, smiling and closing his eyes as he took in everything that had been said and done so far. Relaxed in his chair, closing his eyes and smiling as he took it all in. After a few minutes of silence, Mifune began softly, 3 outposts remain, with minor hideouts and forts still surrounding us. As of right now, the rebels are leaderless, broken, and disorganized. Given the right amount of force, they will likely fall apart. It is unsettling to not know the exact number of our enemy, but like the past 2 wars, the samurai will always prevail. Hiroto smirked, anticipating the inevitable, that old tactic Mifune dono? The wise man let out a bark of laughter before continuing, why, we haven't used that since the first war. I'd give anything to be able to see Takeshi's face when that moment finally arrives. Mifune allowed himself to develop a smirk. Even though we samurai are drilled in face-to-face combat, we sometimes have to resort to our own brand of deception. Fukui hoped to get some clarification, so he asked, Master, about this plan? The general blinked his eyes open and his expression hardened. The general began, his eyes now open and a serious expression plastered across his face, I will go over this once, and that is it. And before anyone asks, yes, Uzumaki-san will be informed when the time comes, but that is it. Okay. So here's the plan. After a month, Yuki had fallen asleep on Naruto's chest, and Shizuka had laid her head next to hers. Shizuka has put in a lot of work over the past month, but it seems to be paying off. Her proficiency in Fuinjutsu and her knowledge of medicine both grew gradually but steadily. They hadn't even begun to approach the Sanin's level yet, but it was one they aspired to one day. A steady stream of visitors visited Naruto in the hospital over the course of a month, leaving behind a smattering of cards, flowers, and random gifts. Beside his bed was an armor rack where his samurai armor and swords were displayed. The visiting samurai all took the time to fix up and polish Naruto's armor and weapons as a sign of respect for the young commander. Tsunade ran a diagnostic on Naruto 2 days ago, and he was found to have fully recovered from his wounds. The slug sage smiled as he weaned Naruto off his medication and broke the news to Shizuka and Mifune that Naruto's induced coma would soon be over. Even though Kurama had aided in the healing process, the Tsunade warned that Naruto would likely need extensive physical therapy to get back to full strength. There was much conjecture as to whether or not Naruto's injuries would prevent him from returning to his samurai ways and at what point he would regain full strength. Shizuka just woke up as the door to Naruto's room opened and her 2 senseis walked in, beaming at her. The person groaned and stirred just as the door was closed and they were about to talk to Shizuka about Naruto's status. Everyone turned their attention to Naruto as he opened his eyes and blinked a few times to clear the fog. Once Naruto caught sight of Shizuka, her joy at seeing her long-lost love revived quickly faded. Naruto said softly, hey, my fair. But Shizuka slapped him in the face, cutting off his speech. Tsunade and Jiraiya flinched at the sound of the passionate kiss, but their expressions quickly turned to smiles. Shizuka said through tears, don't ever do that again, you hear me? After they finally separated, Naruto wiped a stray tear from Shizuka's face and reassured her, "Don't worry my fair maiden, I won't be dying anytime soon. That much I can guarantee you." Yuki, tired of being ignored, latched onto Naruto's face and gave him a couple of sloppy licks. Naruto scratched the fox's ears and said, "Happy to see you too, Yuki." He then looked at his godparents. "Nice to see you both again, Jiraiya-san and Tsunade-san. I appreciate your care." Tsunade smiled and said, "It was the least we could do, Naruto, but please don't scare us like that again." As Jiraiya checked the seal on Kyuubi, he said, "Tsunade's right, Gaki." He then lifted Naruto's shirt. "You passed away twice before they could get you stabilized, they say." When Jiraiya nodded, indicating that the seal was still in place, Naruto sighed and said, "I know. I still can't believe I'm the only one to survive that technique, but Kurama filled me in on what happened while I was out." Tsunade, as well as Mifune and the commanders who had just entered, overheard what he mumbled. Mifune's tone indicated he was not amused, and his question, and what such technique calls for the near death of the caster, Uzumaki-san, was essentially an order. Since he was met with blank stares, Naruto elaborated on his claim that Masamune saw it with his own eyes, and that this was the sole reason he could use his ki to its full potential. Naruto stared down the samurai leader and said, "Ki, as we know, strengthens our muscles, increases our speed, and can be used for attacks if one takes the time to understand one's inner self, but we feel no after-effects as the ki is used in small doses. To paraphrase, tell me, Mifune Dono, how much ki does a person have?" He hummed thoughtfully for a moment before finally uttering, "Endless, I suppose." Everyone's eyes widened except Naruto's, but they quickly turned to shock as he continued, "Correct, but only because we constantly replenish it from the life forces around us. Our ancestors, however, found a way to store this energy within, which is how I, and others, can make their ki signature vanish. Consider the potential release of all that stored energy." Mifune sighed in understanding as he said, "Dear Kami, to hold so much then let it release. An extremely powerful technique that almost detonates the user's chakra energy." Even Naruto, remembering the excruciating pain he endured because of this technique, felt chills run up and down his spine at the mere thought of it. Naruto elaborated, saying, "That's why the technique is suicide." To quote one of the survivors, "Many did not know how to regulate their ki to get the full effects of the technique, so yes. They literally exploded. For those that did manage to regulate their ki, they died about an hour later due to their injuries. If not for Kurama, I wouldn't be having this conversation with you, and is also why I took the risk." Mifune waited a long time before breaking his silence to forbid Naruto from using that technique again unless he could find a way to make it more manageable. Since he had no desire to feel that agony again, Naruto readily agreed. That, and he couldn't stand seeing Shizuka in that expression. He vowed he would never put her through such anguish again. Small talk later, and with Mifune and Fukui's blessing, Naruto agreed to study Fuinjutsu and medicine with his godparents. Afterwards, the room was cleared out, leaving only Mifune and the commanders inside. But once they were out of earshot, they began discussing their next steps. Jiraiya, realizing the gravity of the situation, sealed the door behind him as he left to prevent eavesdropping. The Toad Sage cheerfully led the group out of the clinic and back to the training grounds. By day's end, Naruto was able to walk with assistance. Naruto hated this feeling because it represented weakness, but it also motivated the young field commander to push through and get in better shape. With a possible counterattack on the horizon, I have no time to moan and groan about my predicament. Instead, I will use this trial to strengthen myself, body and soul. Naruto was currently leaning against Shizuka's shoulder as he hobbled around, feeling a sharp pain with every step. Tsunade stated that he sustained significant damage to his ligaments and muscles, and that it would take at least a couple of months for him to recover fully. Naruto, being the determined and obstinate individual that he is, stared Tsunade in the eyes and said, "I'll be fine in a month, maybe less." Naruto was aware that Kurama had limits, and the last thing he wanted to do was put too much pressure on the Biju after all he had accomplished. As they approached the training area, Shizuka remarked, "That's it Naruto, we're almost there." The question, "Do you need a break or anything?" As he shook his head, Naruto said, "Thank you, but I should be fine. In fact, I would like trying to walk on my own from here." She asked anxiously, "You have only been out for less than a day. Are you sure?" She sighed when the answer was a simple no. Shizuka reluctantly released Naruto's grip, but she remained close by in case he needed her. A single. In just 2 easy movements. So far, so good. There have been 3 steps. There are 4 simple steps. The 5 simple steps are. Naruto grimaced in pain and wobbled uncontrollably. Shizuka caught Naruto just in time to prevent him from hitting the icy ground, and the two of them laughed as they did so. Before continuing, Shizuka paused to kiss Naruto on the lips, saying, "We're in this together, Naruto-kun. My pain is yours, and your pain is mine." Naruto returned the affectionate peck. "Let's go visit the elemental nations once this war is over and forget about our problems for a while." After they pulled apart for another kiss, Naruto said, "Hard to believe a year has passed since we met. Once I got to know you, I realized that my future wasn't as bleak as it had been before. I love you, Shizuka-chan. I never thought anybody would love a soul such as I due to the burden I carry." "Me too, Naruto-kun." Once again, the kiss was passionate, and they fell to the snowy ground to begin making out. However, before they could continue, someone cleared their throat, causing them to separate and redden. They were already blushing before they saw who it was. "Alright, you lovebirds," Jiraiya said with a sly grin, "unless you want to be a part of my Icha-Icha, I suggest you follow me the rest of the way to the training grounds. Speaking of which, how did you enjoy my writing, Naruto? Never again will you act like a pervert." The super pervert boasted, "I'm not just a pervert." Shizuka's sweating and looking at Naruto like, "Are you shitting me? Really, this guy's your godfather?" Naruto laughed in response, but the Toad Sage suddenly felt a dark cloud descend upon him. The gloomy mood lifted quickly, though, and everyone hurried to the training ground, where they found Tsunade already in attendance. Following some light conversation, she led Shizuka in a game of dodgeball while Jiraiya began teaching Naruto the art of Fuinjutsu. "Now, I do realize that your ki prevents you from using chakra, but that doesn't mean you can't study your Uzumaki ancestry." The Toad Sage produced another scroll from his haori and handed it to Naruto. This one featured a spiral symbol. The scroll seemed to throb in his hands, as if it were making a request. To paraphrase, Jiraiya, why is it pulsing?" When Naruto nodded, the man said with a grin, "See the Uzumaki symbol. Fill it with your blood." When Naruto did, there was a brief flash of light and the scroll was unrolled and ready to be read. The many sealing scrolls it contained as well as some of Uzu's history before they were destroyed left Naruto in awe as he looked inside. Naruto questioned, "How did you get this? Doesn't one need chakra to break the seals on these?" After ruffling Naruto's hair, Jiraiya explained to him how Nagato became the Godem and how they were related. The Sennin continued by detailing how he and Nagato modified the seals so that they could be activated with no need for chakra, other than a single drop of Uzumaki blood. "By Uzumaki standards, I am only a level 5 when it comes to sealing, and that's the halfway point. Gaki, I don't expect you or your girlfriend to understand these seals or even attempt to replicate them just yet." The Uzumaki were feared for their Fuinjutsu expertise, and with good reason. Naruto was stunned. He had no idea his clan had such firepower. Though it broke his heart that he couldn't devote himself to the craft, Naruto took comfort in the fact that Shizuka would be able to use these seals for good in the future. However, Jiraiya clearing his throat interrupted his train of thought. With Naruto's affirmative response, the Sennin beamed with satisfaction. "Now, in order to make seals, you must have a steady hand. Also, in order to understand seals, you must know how to make them. Is that understood?" Jiraiya unrolled a scroll from his haori, revealing the arsenal of Fuinjutsu. "Good," he said, "now I am going to have you write a certain kanji over and over again. If you mess up, I will have you start over on another sheet. Your calligraphy will be corrected until it satisfies me." Upon hearing this, Jiraiya said, "I understand, but I cannot just sit around all day, Godfather." Naruto then brought up his physical therapy, to which Jiraiya replied, "I see. I need to quickly regain my strength." Naruto was caught off guard by Jiraiya's half-evil smirk and wondered if he would come to regret his words. "Let's just say there was a reason why your father was considered one of the strongest Hokages, only second to our Shodai. Now, I may be a super pervert, but if you wish for me to get serious, and get you to top shape and then some. What monstrosity have I unleashed?" The 800th journal entries. The past month has been exhausting for Shizuka and I. When it comes to discipline, both of my godparents are as harsh as Master Harumasa. Kurama seems to have aided my progress in physical therapy, which is good news. Tsunade says I should be ready to fight again in about 2 weeks, which has shocked both of us. Learning how to make medicinal bombs and elixirs from different plant species has been the most calming aspect of my training so far in the medical field. Maybe I can check on my garden back in Konoha once this war is over. Shizuka and I have been working together on Fuinjutsu, and our proficiency in that area has increased dramatically as a result. I mean, 2 minds are better than 1, right? There is currently a period of calm regarding the war, but I am aware that this will not last forever. And I think everyone else, is extremely anxious right now. My godparents are beginning to wonder if they, too, will be called upon to play a role in this. Mifune, however, reassured them that their scouts would alert them in such a scenario. Mifune was adamant about keeping non-native shinobi out of the conflict. Practice fields. What Shizuka and Naruto were up to today was a complete mystery, but they were meditating as they waited for Tsunade and Jiraiya to arrive at their regular training spot. The Sannin gave them no other information than that today would be special, which only added to the intrigue. When Naruto's thoughts had settled, he couldn't help but laugh at Mifune's strategy for the inevitable counterattack. But as he reflected on this, a tug began to exert its influence. Curious, Naruto gave in to the feeling and found himself staring at a series of images, some of which were serene and others that resembled something out of a nightmare. The sky was overcast, and the air was cool and breezy, but there was also another scent in the air. It had a sharp odor, as if something were burning. The scene then shifted to a burning building with terrified people inside yelling in agony as they were slowly consumed by the flames. The wind never caused the flames to die down. Rather, their intensity only increased. The images returned to their original location quickly, and Naruto opened his eyes in a start to see Shizuka staring at him anxiously. "Are you feeling okay, Naruto?" "Shizuka-chan, I'm not so sure. I'm not positive." After clearing his head, Naruto realized something. "Please wait while I go get something from my house." Naruto sprinted back to the main village, leaving a bewildered Shizuka behind. The sight of the charred ground beneath the melting snow at the spot where Naruto sat only added to her bewilderment. "What's the matter, my sweetheart?" When Jiraiya and Tsunade asked where Naruto was, Shizuka simply pointed to the spot where he meditated. Both Sannin, like Shizuka, were perplexed by the anomaly and unable to provide an explanation for it. Naruto came back with a book and a huge grin on his face just as they were about to start talking. He paused and looked down, and what he saw made him and the others chortle. When Naruto saw his students' puzzled expressions, he quickly turned to the appropriate page and began explaining. Like I said before, Ki is the life force that powers all forms of life on Earth. However, this clarifies how the term living can be used to describe 5 distinct categories: water, soil, flame, air, and spirit. The energy I channel into Ki attacks with my sword, Hanjo, comes from ether, which functions as a sort of base. The lost Masamune? Jiraiya exclaimed in shock. That's a long story for another time. After receiving a response, Naruto went on. As I sat in meditation, I was drawn to a different part of my inner self, one I had never before considered possible. Until now. I looked up at the stars, felt the cool air on my face, and caught a whiff of smoke as I watched a house burn to the ground. With a grin on his face, Naruto put the book down and looked at Shizuka, Tsunade, and Jiraiya. There is only one logical conclusion to this. Wind and fire make up your Ki. However, a thought occurred to Shizuka at this point. You may be asking, but wait, how are you supposed to bring them out? Not sure, but all roads have bumps in them, Naruto shrugged. It's up to me to figure out how to win. A mere vessel waiting to be filled, in my master's words. A never-ending procedure right up until the end, I suppose. Tsunade and Jiraiya shook their heads at each other in amusement, before inviting Shizuka to join them. When she finally did, Jiraiya handed her a sheet of chakra paper. You might ask, what is this? To determine your affinity for a particular element or elements, Tsunade explained. While uttering a "oh," Shizuka went on to say that she was well aware of her elementa, the wind. Most of her criticisms had this as their foundation. The Sannin, however, encouraged her to give it a shot. When she added chakra to the paper, an additional elementa eartha appeared, much to everyone's surprise. Well, between the two of you, we have air, fire, and ground. This is a great match. Jiraiya said, clapping his hands and cracking a grin. Okay, let's begin with some earth chakra exercises, Shizuka. Tsunade continued, moreover, how would you like to know the secret of enhanced strength? Tsunade gently tapped the ground before anyone could say anything. At first, nothing happened, but soon after Tsunade landed, a sizable crater formed, and cracks spread out from its sides. Shade just a Tapeda, Naruto was trying to pick his fallen jaw up off the floor as Shizuka said in shock. Even though Naruto was aware that ki increased strength, his godmother's ability to perform incredible feats with only a tap and a tiny amount of chakra made his own ki seem like a candle in comparison. The two students were regaining their composure when Fukui appeared, his expression grim. I'm sorry, Tsunade-san and Jiraiya-san, but I think we can expect an attack from the enemy soon. It pains me to tell you that the only way to avoid the beast of war is to return to Konoha as soon as possible. They both heaved a sigh and responded in a glum fashion at the same time. A common question is, how long? It's possible they're trying to trick us, but it could be a week at most, Harumasa shrugged. As Mifune puts it, we have only 3 days. And the circle spins on. Naruto cut in, a wistful grin on his face. The time has come to begin the operation, it seems. That's right, and your teacher couldn't be more pleased with your work. Fukui cracked a grin. As the Japanese would say, welcome back, Commander Uzumaki. Tsunade and Jiraiya sputtered in shock as Naruto bowed and thanked his master. You're the commander, and you're so young. Fukui smirked to himself as he observed the Sanin's expressions of surprise. To quote Mifune, remember Jiraiya-san, Tsunade-san, our operation starts in 3 days, and Mifune expects you to be out by tomorrow morning. Once the Harumasa had left, the Sanin continued their day's training with a nod and a thank you. Naruto ended the day by taking everyone out to a fancy restaurant, the same one where he and Shizuka had their first date. It was sad for Tsunade and Jiraiya to say goodbye to their godson after they had grown close to him. However, they felt confident that he was in capable hands. With Shizuka by his side and his samurai training, it appeared that nothing could deter Naruto from his goal. However, in the not-too-distant future, our blonde and red-haired protagonist will face a challenge that will put his skills to the ultimate test. Somewhere in Iron Country, with Takeshi. Takeshi was in a coma for a shorter period of time than Naruto, but as he began to regain consciousness, he conceived of a cunning plan. Now that the plan was in motion, troops were relocated to strategic points and orders were reviewed multiple times to ensure success. Takeshi was so confident in his strategy that he committed the bulk of his forces to a single mission he believed would guarantee his success. Takeshi had hoped that by resuming contact with Tobi, they could repair their relationship, but Tobi had already severed ties with him. I may have to start over if this counterattack is successful, but it will be done according to my standards, with my laws, and with me at the helm. Men, women, and children alike will be conscripted into my army and taught to obey my every whim. If someone disobeys me, I will label them a traitor and have them publicly executed. This is the ideal representation of my future Iron Country. Takeshi let out an evil cackle that resounded throughout the space he was occupying. The outside guards exchanged glances, then shrugged as they came to accept Takeshi as nothing more than a raving lunatic.
They were more concerned with how to make amends to Mifune once the war was over. While hearing and reading accounts of their most recent defeat, some rebels shared this sentiment. There was only one person the rebels feared more than their insane leader.
Members of the Akuma no Senshi. No one knew his real name, only what they'd heard from witnesses. They said it was a red-eyed monster that moved at the speed of light. A vicious beast that showed no mercy to those who stood in their way. Some said this emotionless, mindless beast had the legendary Lost Masamune in its possession. A monster with the skill of a master bladesman, never missing an opponent. One thing, though, was consistent across all the stories. Takeshi fought back against it, and his efforts resulted in serious injuries. What hope did they have if their leader was killed by this boy Ano, this demonic warrior? In the minds of the rebels, seeds of doubt germinated and are now beginning to spread. Doubt. A heavy word which was used cautiously when Takeshi was around, but, when he wasn't, conversations had started. We can't win this war, Takeshi isn't a good leader, Mifune will never forgive us, are all phrases that have been used to spark debate and discussion. Question everything. It resounded in their minds like the legend of the Akuma no Senshi, whom they were destined to face in battle after a certain amount of time had passed. Tobi, their instructor, instilled in them a lack of fear by showing no sign of having it himself. However, uncertainty brings about worry. Takeshi's forces were imploding around him, and it was only a matter of time until they were pushed to that certain edge, to that certain point where they would fall of the cliff. The samurai were in a rush as klaxons sounded throughout the main village in Iron Country. Everyone heard the horn and knew what it meant, an impending attack. Mifune and the other commanders, however, remained calm despite the chaos, knowing that the enemy was still some distance away. Moreover, it was a part of Mifune's ambitious strategy to end the war today. Despite its apparent simplicity, it was effective in the First War. The core population would simply leave and blend in with neighboring civilian communities that would inevitably come under attack. Mifune and his samurai guards would remain in the main village to maintain order and eliminate any potential threats. From that vantage point, the enemy would be hit from not just one but two directions. Since not every village required them due to civilian armament, Mifune surveyed his command staff and decided to leave two of them behind. Takeshi will probably try to sever the head of the snake, so Uzumaki-san and Harumasa-san, you'll be staying here with me. Naruto agreed, but he also provided his own opinion. Shouldn't I be at my outpost right now? Mifune Dono, not to discredit your plan, but... General Mifune shook his head, looking at his former student with a sad smile, and said, no, I had all troops there relocate to the nearest civilian villages. And, with the casualties the enemy will take today, they will not worry about some trivial outpost. I give you permission to kill your brother, Fukui, my student. Do what you couldn't in the Second War and put an end to this painful chapter in your life. Fukui nodded, then cast a mournful glance at Naruto. There was an energy in the atmosphere today, something he could feel but no one else could. The Harumasa was aware of what was coming and hoped for the best for his student. Speaking of which, he removed a letter from his kimono, clutched it tightly in his hands, and handed it to Mifune from inside his armor. Mifune scowled and asked, so, it's time then? Hi, and when the darkness has been finally vanquished, please give this to Naruto. Mifune tapped Fukui on the back briefly before nodding. That you will be respected is a promise I make to you. Even though the horns were still honking, it was time to round up the troops and get them packed and ready to go. Mifune only needed to wave his hand for Hiroto, Takuma, and Hideki to gather up nearly all of the samurai they had and explain the plan. Some people were perplexed by Mifune's unusual strategy, but they were reluctant to cast doubt on his abilities because they were aware of his many battles and successes. More than 10,000 samurai left the main village, leaving only about 1,500 behind. The final conflict was drawing near, and it was sure to become the stuff of legend for at least one person. Amidst the Iron Heartlands, Takeshi led his massive rebel army, which outnumbered the samurai by a wide margin, with a broad grin on his face. The rebel leader thought this counterattack would be impossible to counter. Takeshi was aware of the civilian weaponry, but he still considered them insignificant in comparison to his army, despite the reports of their successes. Even though Takeshi was aware of Mifune's brilliance in battle and his many achievements, he viewed the leader as old and unfit to lead due to mental decline. Takeshi had such high regard for this that he scoffed at the idea of Mifune dividing up his samurai among the different villages. His carelessness contributed to his downfall once again. Takeshi told his troops, I don't care if you have to kill everyone there, and burn the place down to get the job done. Building and repopulating can be done later. Now go. The mere mention of the word, repopulation, was enough to send shivers down the spines of the female soldiers. Why? They knew that if the civilian population was decimated in this counterattack, they would have no choice but to start reproducing again. It made them sick, and they began to question whether or not the war was worth fighting. Takeshi smirked evilly as his armies marched off, thinking, I will finally be under Toba's good graces, and when the time comes I will lead us into war once again. Takeshi's scattered enclaves in Iron Country were never warned of the impending counteroffensive. Not at all. They discovered this by some other means. A small group of dissidents who were fed up with Takeshi's rule would count as other. They were prepared to make amends with Mifune for all of these secluded outposts, which were located conveniently close to all of the civilian villages. After months of preparation, a coup d'état was about to begin with flawless coordination between all the hiding places. Mifune's office, 2 days later. Naruto and Shizuka are currently engaged in a game of shogi, with Yuki, Fukui, and Mifune looking on. The last 2 days, to put it bluntly, have been dull. No signs of the enemy had been reported by the samurai in the civilian villages, so now everyone was just waiting. Outwardly, everyone was calm and patient, but they were actually experiencing a wide range of emotions. The impending battle has sparked excitement, but so has the possibility that this could finally be the end of the war. The feedback Mifune received from the surrounding villages after implementing this strategy was encouraging. Months after the armament, the civilians were still hard at work improving their defenses, as if they had some advance warning that something major was about to happen. Spikes for the trench traps built by the villagers were fashioned from whatever scrap metal the blacksmiths could find. The burlap sack that had been staked over these trenches was eventually buried by snow. They stopped Mifune's forces outside and warned them about the traps before letting them in safely. According to the reports, each trench was 5 feet deep, 3 feet wide, and topped with spikes that were roughly 3 feet in length. However, that wasn't their only action. The remaining scraps of wood were fashioned into a makeshift shield for the archers. The samurai had taught the commoners how to strategically place these on the tops of specific buildings, so the populace did the same. Mifune was relieved to think that even if they were outnumbered, they still had the element of surprise on their side. With a grin on his face, Naruto declared, "Checkmate." Shizuka frowned at the board and said, "How do you always win? It's not fair." An explosion was heard near the gates, and everyone laughed as the board was being prepared for another game. As soon as they realized what needed to be done, the mood in the room changed dramatically. A samurai stopped them as they were leaving the office and heading downstairs to join the battle. "Mifune-sama, they have us outnumbered 2-1. Mifune smiled and said, "Fear not, for Commander Uzumaki has dealt with this before. Please may I speak with Uzumaki-san?" Naruto greeted the soldier in front of him with a polite, "Hi, Mifune Dono. Deploy the archers to the rooftops. We'll surprise them with a surprise attack." The samurai agreed and said, "Hi, Commander, but what shall be your signal to fire?" To paraphrase a famous samurai, "You will know, Samurai-san." Dismissed. The soldier agreed and dashed off to round up the available archers. The second blast occurred on the opposite side of the village. Mifune chuckled lightly before continuing, "Ah, a classic pincer maneuver." He looked at Shizuka and mused, "Too bad we have the element of surprise. Shizuka-san, would you please greet our guests?" "I'm happy to oblige, Mifune Dono." She gave Naruto a quick kiss and then bolted into battle, carrying kunai, poison senbon, and some combat fuinjutsu in her pouches. Naruto sighed and stepped out into the snow and cold, but he had one thing to say as he did so. "After today, peace is possible, but as long as you are alive, conflict is guaranteed." Mifune patted Naruto on the shoulder and said, "The words of Hashirama Senju, very fitting Uzumaki-san." With a nod, Naruto unsheathed Hanjo and held it aloft. The archers in the area tensed up in anticipation. There was the sound of battle cries from the enemy, followed by the sound of explosions as they smashed through the defenses. Naruto quickly located the enemy and began mentally counting down the seconds until it was safe to attack. When Naruto's hand finally did let go 10 seconds later, the air was filled with almost inaudible whistles as the arrows flew. The enemy looked up, just like they did during the outpost raid many months ago, and saw death. Knowing their time was up, many runners gave up, but those who weren't afraid of the Shinigami kept going. As the arrows found their targets, screams of death filled the air, but were quickly drowned out by the roar of multiple fireballs. There was a second strike force backing up the first. Naruto yelled, "Scatter!" And everyone dispersed as he had commanded. The enemy charged in for the kill as Mifune, Naruto, and Fukui ducked incoming fireballs and deflected some with ki-enhanced punches. It didn't take long for Mifune's samurai to join the fray, and soon the air was filled with the clash of swords and the roar of jutsu. As Naruto and Mifune exchanged blows, Fukui, sensing his brother's presence, began a slow but deadly approach. Fukui's swordsmanship was feared by all, and the two brothers eventually reconnected. Takeshi grinned and said, "Fukui, my brother, we meet again. The question is, are you going to fail again like you did in the Second War, or are you just going to give me another scar to remind me of your weakness?" With his katana raised, Fukui told Takeshi, "No, today will be the last day you take breath. Let us take this death dance in honor of my wife and the blades she gave me to wield." There was fire in both brothers' eyes and their voices were serious and emotionless. Takeshi wanted to rule the world. Fukui's goals were to put an end to the conflict once and for all and to find love. After what seemed like an eternity of staring, the brothers disappeared. All that could be seen or heard were the sparks and clangs of their katanas clashing. She was outnumbered, but thanks to her training with the Sannin, Shizuka approached the area of the explosion with confidence. As the foe charged at her, she charged her fists with wind chakra and punched forward, sending out a tremendous shockwave. The Nadeshiko-style hardliner Gale Fist. Any threat up front was met with a swift invisible punch that knocked out a large number of followers behind them. Shizuka kept up her assault with a massive barrage of kunai and poisoned senbon during her Nadeshiko-style Deep Crimson dance performance. There were a lot of deaths due to this technique because it was so difficult to avoid. Some of the adversaries experienced self-doubt as a result, but continued to press forward regardless. Near the end of her technique, Shizuka was attacked by an enemy who had gotten close enough to try to kill her with a katana. Shizuka used chakra scalpels to break in half the rebel's blade and then plunged her hand into his brain. The rebels regarded her with awe, but the ones in the back were dead set on finding a resolution. After a series of hand gestures, a swarm of elemental dragons was unleashed on Shizuka. She laughed as she erected an earth-style wall to deflect the attacks, but when the dust settled, Shizuka was nowhere to be found. A voice yelled, "Hey assholes!" from behind them. It's like a scream, earth flow spears. The insurgents' feet rumbled the ground, and then they screamed in pain as several spikes shot up out of the ground and impaled them. Most of them passed away instantly, but a few would hold on until they bled to death a minute later. Few rebels remained, and those that did began to tremble before the women who stood before them. A few of the more bold ones attempted to charge, but they were unsuccessful. Shizuka drew her katana, charged it with wind chakra, and charged headfirst into battle. She ducked and weaved under several blade strikes, all the while letting her katana's wind blades fly. These are so effective that Shizuka, in just a few minutes, was standing in the midst of a pile of dead enemies with blood pooling at her feet. The remaining rebels knew they were outnumbered and played it safe by quickly surrendering, weapons in hand. Shizuka probed the remaining members of the force, estimating there to be between 100 and 150 of them, asking whether they had attacked out of fear of their leader or because they followed him like a sick puppy. After a minute of silence, one rebel finally spoke up. "Can you promise that Mifune will talk with us if we help you defend this place? We've been worried about Takeshi for a long time. Some of us have even considered a coup." Shizuka was surprised to hear of a coup, but it made sense because she was familiar with Takeshi, the cold-hearted, sadistic bastard that he was. "Okay, you can help me fight, but if you attack us again, I will kill you all." Clear? The rebels seemed to agree with her because of her harsh tone and obvious desire to kill. Shizuka smiled, drew her katana back into its scabbard, and gestured for the other rebels to follow. As the saying goes, a coup, huh? Well, it seems this battle just got a bit easier. Villages of civilians. The rebels' tactics were consistent across all civilian settlements. The first group to attack would be met with spikes, arrows, and the savagery of the samurai guarding the village's perimeter. With each succeeding wave, it was possible to advance by a small margin. The samurai on patrol saw this and decided to go into the village to join forces with the other soldiers there. Some of the rebels in this wave were killed by arrows or were impaled, but the majority of them used the severed heads of their fallen comrades to cross the trench and enter the town. Samurai and villagers alike soon found themselves fighting for survival and pride. Soon after, a third wave arrived, also hoping to confuse and subdue the villagers, but like the first two, they were unprepared for samurai. Some of the rebels became increasingly angry at Takeshi's constant deception as the battle continued. Did he lead us here to die and claim all the glory for himself, despite his earlier assurance that no samurai would be present? Was what Hiroto, Takuma, and Hideki, rebels in different villages, were thinking and feeling. Despite their bewilderment, they decided to let these people alone to see how they would react. Those who shared these sentiments quickly began attacking the samurai's common foe. That wasn't the worst of it, though. A war cry erupted not far away, and suddenly the rebels from their scattered outposts stormed the village. The commanders and samurai were prepared to fight the new enemy force, but they were taken aback when the new enemies began attacking Takeshi's devoted followers. It dawned on them all of a sudden that they were witnessing a coup. Both the samurai and the coup forces exchanged glances with each other. They hesitated to do anything at first, but then they cracked smiles and ran headfirst into their shared enemy. Some people had finally had enough of Takeshi's antics and wanted a second chance, and this was a message for Hiroto, Takuma, and Hideki. The looming concern was what Mifune would do to them after the war ended. At the same time that the coup forces, samurai, and civilians were fighting, there was also a battle going on between brothers, joined by Fukui and Takeshi. As their blades clashed, the two brothers stared at each other emotionlessly. The two groups quickly broke apart and resumed their attacks. Takeshi lunged in for the kill, but Fukui sidestepped and grabbed his brother by the arm. Fukui grabbed Takeshi by the throat and tried to drive his knee into Takeshi's gut by pulling himself forward once he had a firm grip. Aware of this, the rebel leader blocked with his own knee, setting off a graceful exchange of Aikido techniques. They put away their swords and looked for a way to knock each other to the floor. The siblings did not exchange words but instead fought as if releasing years of pent-up aggression. Takeshi avoided his brother's snap kick and grabbed his leg, hoping to break it. However, Fukui proved that he was no ordinary samurai by squatting down and kicking Takeshi in the chin with his free leg. Fukui took advantage of the brother's fumble and was about to attack when a gust of wind blew him into a nearby building. Fukui laughed as he stood up after recovering from his fall. "I figured you'd employ clones to assist you." Takeshi scowled. "That just proves to you why I'm going to win this match." They were about to start fighting when Shizuka's voice rang out. To paraphrase, "Fukui-sama, I figured you could use a little help with those pesky clones of his." Only one of the brothers was smiling as they looked at her. The sight of 100 or so of his rebels choosing to fight with the samurai infuriated Takeshi. "I will personally see to it that you all are put to death for disobeying my orders." The former insurgents laughed, and one of them said, "Yeah, fuck you too." Shizuka and Fukui laughed, but then Takeshi summoned 4 earth golems and silenced them. The brothers resumed their fight after being put on high alert by the sudden onslaught of golems targeting Shizuka and the former rebels. Shizuka ran up to one of the golems as they did so, and with Tsunade's incredible strength, she punched it. The defeated golem gave the former rebels hope that they still had a chance. "I'll take care of the golems while you find Takeshi's duplicates to protect Fukui, so go." The fighting between the brothers continued as they had been instructed. Once again, they tried to use Aikido to throw each other to the ground, but they were evenly matched. They stumbled and ran away from each other, only to meet again, this time to grab each other's hands and grunt with exhaustion. The two brothers stared each other down, but Fukui recognized the danger in his brother's smirk. To be sure, Takeshi stepped in and used an explosive tagged log in place of the original weapon in an attempt to destroy his sibling. One of two things happened that he hadn't anticipated. The first is that Fukui smiled knowing that his brother was in an adjacent alley. 2. Fukui used a spin kick to send the explosive log flying in the direction of the alley where his brother was hiding. This whole thing takes place in a fraction of a second. To avoid the explosion, Takeshi cursed and employed the hiding like a mole technique. Unfortunately for him, Shizuka used Tsunade's super strength technique to smash a golem to the ground as he went to appear behind his brother. The resulting crater blasted cracks through the ice, and one of them propelled Takeshi to his feet, where he caught sight of his brother's gleaming face. Laughing, Fukui said, "Well, I didn't expect to find a carrot in the ground." He then grabbed his brother by the hair and pulled. After getting up, Fukui repeatedly struck his brother in the stomach with his free hand, strengthening each blow with ki, until the latter vomited up a large amount of blood. Takeshi was unaware of his impending building collision until it was too late. Thankfully, he got up and leaned against the wall for a boost. Another Kenjutsu match was started by the brothers, but this time it was different. Fukui took a sitting position and started Tatehiza no Biyu. As hard as he tried, Takeshi was unable to break through his brother's defenses. The reason for this was that he lacked proficiency in any samurai tradition other than the ones he had been taught by his parents. Fukui made use of this weakness. Fukui finished the kata for the person in front of Takeshi, which would have killed Takeshi's brother had he not evaded the attack in time. Takeshi, Fukui's brother, was not so lucky, as the katana slashed him deeply from the left hip to the right shoulder. The rebel leader hissed in pain and devised a diabolical plan because he knew he would lose the battle if he relied solely on samurai tactics. "It looks like you failed, bro. The weakness is still there." As Fukui frowned, he said, "No, you dodged at the last second. An impressive feat, mind you. Now, come, let us finish this. The war ends today." Takeshi chuckled, "Yes, it will, with me being the victor, and you being gone from my life forever." Fukui sensed something was wrong, but by that time it was too late. A clone of Takeshi had suddenly fled from an area that the ex-rebels and Shizuka hadn't covered. The clone exploded, sending Fukui flying toward his brother. As he did so, he caught a glimpse of Takeshi drawing his sword. Fukui could tell it was going to be a thrust to the heart by the way the fighter was crouching. He turned his attention back to the fight between Naruto and Mifune as time slowed. Many rebels lay dead at their feet, and the samurai had rounded up any who had surrendered. Fukui was delighted when he caught Naruto's attention and looked his way. He had an excellent life despite knowing the pain he would cause his student upon his passing. Even if he managed to block or avoid Takeshi's blow, he knew he'd be seriously hurt. He smiled and said, "Goodbye, my student," before he allowed his brother's blade to pierce his heart. Takeshi was taken aback, to put it mildly. His brother should have avoided the blow or countered, but he didn't. Unexpectedly, his brother was still alive, but all he could muster were a few words that caused him to question everything he had done since that fateful day in World War II. As my brother would say, "Hey, you beat me in something." As Takeshi's tears began to fall, a sharp pain shot through his chest, the same severe wound he had inflicted on his brother. When he looked down, he saw Fukui grinning bloodily. With a bloody grin on their faces, the brothers knelt down and pressed closer together, knowing their time was up. They hugged each other like brothers, ignoring the pain as the blades in their hearts were driven deeper. Silence fell upon the battlefield as their breathing ceased. In death, two brothers who harbored deep animosity toward one another were able to find peace with one another. Together, Mifune and Naruto. As the battle with the rebels came to a close, Naruto turned to his master. He realized what was about to occur and was terrified. As soon as he caught a glimpse of Fukui's moving lips, he grasped every word. "Thank you for being my pupil." The blade sliced through Fukui's heart, and Naruto witnessed his brother's final moments as he held his own. Then, it seemed like time stood still. Not possible. Why didn't he duck? Naruto searched high and low for a reason for his master's death. "Please return, Master Harumasa." Kurama said sadly, "I'm sorry, kid, but he did his best to comfort his ship. We can't save him now. He wanted to go out this way. I apologize once more." When Kurama appeared in Naruto's mind, he was completely oblivious to his presence and Kurama's words. Yami was standing by the cage where Kurama was being held, grinning savagely as he waited. Time has come. Kurama's pupils widened as Yami and Naruto were overcome by a dark energy. "Resist, Naruto. Don't let the nightfall swallow you up. There's no point in trying, Kyuubi," Yami chuckled. "He will always be mine. Look on in horror as he murders those he holds dear." A shadowy radiance surrounded Naruto, and the whites of his eyes turned a solid blood red. His face was twisted into a savage grin as he surveyed the crowd. Since Mifune was the boy's close friend, he recognized him immediately. The elder samurai leader was left wondering if Naruto would ever recover after the darkness had taken over at the worst possible time. It is now time to die. With an evil cackle, Naruto turned his attention to the nearby samurai and rebels and launched an attack. Mifune was horrified as the boy began butchering them without remorse and laughing maniacally. This little boy is going to require all of Shizuka's affection. He will carry the memory of this tragedy like a dark stain on his soul. Mifune entered the fray with a sigh, hoping to buy Naruto some time to vanquish the shadows. "Naruto. Your true nature." After Fukui's death, Naruto's mind went blank and he floated in a sea of white. Many hands reached out to him as he floated. He heard the voices of his parents, Shizuka, and all his friends in Konoha. But as he floated, he heard a voice that jolted his mind awake. The person was none other than his master. "Remember your samurai background and training, Naruto. Keep in mind all that you've done for the people of Iron Country, why you fight, and especially what you've given up. Until I'm gone, you might not fully grasp what I'm saying." Naruto woke up at the end of that sentence. While he was still floating, he reflected on everything he had accomplished since beginning the path of the warrior and on his master's final words. "I defend the honor of Iron Country and its people while doing so. For this war, for my position as commander, and to train the samurai of this country to fight against the shinobi race, I have given everything I am and more. I have to stay focused right now." After some consideration, Naruto mentally screamed. The speaker yelled, "Wake up, damn it, wake up." When Naruto awoke with that final mental scream, he found himself in total darkness. "Enter my domain at your peril, Naruto." As he emerged from the shadows, Yami said. Clearly angry, Naruto said, I assume you have taken over my body and have started killing those I sacrificed everything for? Oh yes, Yami said with a sneer, and Mifune is just having a lovely time trying to keep you from killing anyone else. You will no longer defile my body with your satanic ways, Yami. Angry, Naruto clenched his teeth. You've been a problem ever since I set out on this road, and now I have no choice but to end it. The shadowy figure laughed, and then it all but vanished into the night. You can't kill someone you can't see, so we'll fight anyway. With a grin on his face, Naruto closed his eyes and let the words of his master wash over him. They say that even a blind samurai can fight. There was silence, but then Naruto dove out of the way of a backhanded punch. Then there was one from his right front. Naruto then did a backflip to avoid Yami's behind-the-back attack with his dark energy katana. Embarrassingly, you dare mock me. Yami's grip on his katana grew more firm. Stop ducking and give it to me straight. There is truth in the saying that a moment of patience can prevent a great disaster and an instant of impatience can ruin a whole life. Another part of Naruto's training resurfaced in his mind, and he remarked on it. Yami shouted as he ran, his goal being to kill Naruto immediately. The individual in question simply leapt, using his or her severed head as a springboard. Yami fell, but she got up and turned to face Naruto, but there was an issue. Nobody could find Naruto. Yami felt a sudden punch to the face, a knee to the stomach, and a hurl across the gloomy mental landscape. The shadowy entity tried to stand up, but was kicked in the back, picked up, and slammed face first into the floor. In the words of the graduating senior, I am a child of hard work, a samurai in training, but after today, I will officially graduate. In the pitch black, Naruto's voice reverberated. After today, I'll have a more positive outlook, and my wings will begin to grow. Yami, please, let's put an end to this. At the same time Yami charged, Naruto drew Hanjo, and as he got into a half-seated stance to initiate his Tatehiza no Biyu, he recalled Fukui's instruction. Just one blow will do it. Naruto drew on his accumulated knowledge and the training of his senses over the course of his 7 years. Time slowed for Naruto as he used ki to sense the target in the pitch black, and the silence was deafening. Naruto was unable to see, hear, or smell, but this did not deter him from his goal of ending it all. He recalled another of his master's sayings as he sent ki pulses out to determine Yami's course and arrival time. Fighting emotions can cause you to lose focus on the battle and the potential threats around you. Naruto's eyes sprang open and he struck like a well-oiled machine. Real life. Mifune had been fighting Naruto for 5 minutes when he began to show signs of fatigue due to his advanced age. To paraphrase, Naruto, please listen to me, don't let it overcome you. Shizuka let out a loud yell. Fight it, my love. I have faith in you. After hearing the new voice, possessed Naruto snapped his head, stopping the fighting between Mifune and the Uzumaki. With a sneering cackle, Naruto moved toward Shizuka, his katana poised for the killing blow. Ah, Shizuka, you're so sweet. What would Naruto think if I just took your life out of the blue like that? Yami Naruto laughed, then went on. After your death, maybe I'll let him take over for a brief bit to solidify my proper place, you said. As in, you're sick. Shizuka shot back a glare in response. Sick? Yami Naruto's head cocked, giving him a crazy appearance. Maybe I am, but I personify every aspect of evil. It's a requirement of the position, honey. Yami slashed at Shizuka as she drew her katana. They collided, and Hanjo's blade was beginning to eat into Shizuka's as he inched closer and closer to Shizuka's neck. Despite her best efforts, she was unable to dislodge the blade. Come on, sweetheart, put up a fight. Shizuka made one last effort to reunite with her beloved Naruto. Don't forget the fun we had together. The voicemail read, would you like to leave a message? Naruto isn't home right now. After a brief pause, Naruto's possessed voice resumed, this time filled with maniacal glee. It's your time to go, pretty lady. Time to. Suddenly, Yami took a step backward and dropped Hanjo. No. It was me who assumed leadership, not you. Naruto, now under the influence of the demon, screamed while holding his head. There is no value in what your master says. Listen up, your former master was a complete and utter zero. Yami the black aura flitted on and off as Naruto collapsed to the ground and writhed in pain. Without warning, the aura detonated, sending snow and dust flying and causing everyone to duck for cover. Those who had managed to escape Naruto's attack approached the boy cautiously, wondering if he was all right. Mindscape of Naruto. Yami watched in awe as his partner's attack whizzed by Naruto. Yami only realized he was charging when he felt a chill pierce his skin. He was currently bleeding out on the ground. In order to have one last conversation with his dark half, Naruto avoided the neck on purpose. As you lay there, bleeding, on the ground of your domain, may you forgive me for what I am about to do. Naruto brandished his katana, poised to cut off Yami's head. Wherever you go when you die, may you feel regret for the harm you've done and the emotional suffering you've brought me today. You put up a good fight, and now may you go out on your own terms. Yami glimpsed his twin and beamed a genuine grin before being confronted by the shadows he once loved. With a sigh, Naruto flicked the blood from Hanjo and sheathed the blade. Then, like a pane of glass being shattered, Yami's domain crumbled, revealing a worried Kurama staring at Naruto. Have no fear, Kurama. I have vanquished Yami. His rage blinded him, and as a result, he was defeated. Naruto's face lit up as he spoke. I learned from my master, but the damage I've done to the world means I'll be joining him soon. Before Naruto could commit seppuku, Kurama tried to dissuade him. However, Kurama disappeared. Someone, please talk some sense into the poor kid and keep him from killing himself today. Real life. When he realized he was being watched, Naruto groggily pushed himself to his feet and avoided making eye contact. When he glanced to his right and saw Hanjo, he grabbed it and prepared to take the ultimate action, but an old, wrinkled hand stopped him. When he looked up, Naruto met Mifune's friendly gaze. Naruto, today is not the day to end your life. Your own inner darkness is what killed your friends, not you. This is what Fukui wanted, and I realize you might not listen to me just yet. Mifune sighed and reached into his kimono to retrieve Fukui's letter when he received no reply from Naruto. He looked at his dead student and then handed it to Naruto with a heavy heart. When you overcame the evil within, your master wanted you to have this. Naruto took it, hands shaking, and said quietly, thank you. We've fought a long and difficult war, Uzumaki-san, but with your help we've finally won. Mifune said with a sour grin on his face. Take as much time as you need, but when you feel better, get in touch with me. We have a lot to talk about. When Naruto felt Shizuka's gentle lips on his own, he nodded and sheathed Hanjo. This was the breaking point for Naruto, and he sobbed into the arms of his beautiful maiden. A hawk's cry could be heard through the couple's passionate embrace. With a knowing smile, Mifune called the hawk down, knowing it was information from civilian villages. When the bird landed on Mifune's shoulder, he noticed that instead of multiple reports, there was only one. He rolled the paper out of curiosity and saw that all three commanders had signed it. For the first time in nearly 2 years, peace had returned to Iron Country because of 3 simple words written on paper. A resounding cry of victory is ours.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.